This is the first Vodcast in Unit 5, which is writing chemical names and formulas. This first section is called Binary Ionic Compounds. For this unit, you should have a periodic table handy for every Vodcast, as well as the golden sheet that you should also get in addition to your unit packet. So there's 5 different ways we can break down inorganic compounds. We can break them down into binary ionic compounds. A binary ionic compound is made up of 2 elements, and one of those is a metal and the other one is a nonmetal. So KCl and then CaO would be an example of a binary ionic compound. Another example of a binary ionic compound would be like MgF2. So I can have more than one of the element, but I just have 2 types of elements. A ternary ionic compound has 3 elements, usually, again, a metal and a nonmetal. But notice this time I've got a metal, here's a nonmetal, and then oxygen's another nonmetal. Okay, in CaSO4, calcium sulfate, a metal, nonmetal, and then oxygen is also a nonmetal. So 3 elements. It's not usually 2 metals. It's usually 1 metal and 2 nonmetals. The third way to classify and name compounds is binary molecular compounds, and those are 2 nonmetals bonded together. So like carbon monoxide, CO, or H2O. So again, I can have more than one of the element, just as long as I only have 2 types of the element. And then the 4th and 5th ones have to deal with naming acids, and naming acids is going to be the B-level work for this unit. For the C-level work, we're only going to cover the first 3 naming types. Just a little review here. Atoms are electrically neutral because they have equal numbers of protons and electrons that cancel each other out perfectly. Ions are atoms or groups of atoms with a positive or negative charge. So like Cl minus. Or a group of atom would be like OH minus, so 2 atoms making a negative charge. Or you can have them with a positive charge, like this. Okay, so those are your ions. They have a plus or a minus at top, sometimes with a number, like Mg2+. Formula units show the lowest whole number ratio of ions in a compound. They're made up of a cation and an anion. The cation's the metal, the anion's the nonmetal. Formula units have ionic bonds, and they're neutral because the cations and the anions cancel each other out perfectly. Okay, so you got to make sure they cancel out. And that's what you worked on in the last unit. You actually started writing chemical formulas. Now we're going to take that one step further and learn their names. Now, a molecule is the smallest electrically neutral unit of a substance that has the properties of that substance. So this is also a term we learned in the last unit. Molecules are made up of 2 or more nonmetal atoms that act together as a unit. So it's all nonmetals together. And these are formed using covalent bonds. We didn't work much on forming these in the last unit. We'll do more of that in this unit and also learn how to give their names. So this just gives us a little summary. You've got your cations, which are positive ions. The way to remember you have a cation is the word cation has a T in it, like a plus sign. Since it's a positive ion, that means it's lost electrons, and then that means the number of protons is greater than the number of electrons. And cations are made by metals. Anions are negatively charged, so they're negative ions. This means they've gained electrons, so they have fewer protons than electrons, and they're made by nonmetals. Polyatomic ions are something new. Okay, polyatomic ions are made up of 2 or more atoms, and they can be positive or negative. So let me show you a polyatomic ion. So SO4 2- would be a polyatomic anion, and then we also have polyatomic cations, though these are much more rare. And I've got a whole vodcast on polyatomic ions, so that's all we're going to say about those for now. Now, this should be review for you. You should be able to predict ionic charges based on where things are on the periodic table. If you have not written it on your periodic table, you want to do so now. Group 1A, they lose 1 electron and they form a +1 ion, like these here. A lot of times we skip writing the 1. We just write H+ or Li+. Chemists are lazy and they skip the 1s. Your group 2A ions lose 2 electrons to form +2 ions. So now the protons outnumber the electrons again. It doesn't matter if you write the plus first or you write it second. If you write +2 or 2+, it doesn't matter. Group 3A loses 3 electrons to form +3 ions. So like your boron, aluminum, and gallium. Indium and thallium down there tend to do some funky things, and we don't use those very often. Your group 4A ions, do they lose electrons or gain 4 electrons? Well, they tend not to form ions, and we're going to get into those before later in this section and also in the next. They tend to do 2 different things, and so we have to accommodate them for that. Group 5A gain 3 electrons to form -3 ions. So nitride, phosphide, arsenide. Your group 6A, they gain 2 electrons and you make oxide, sulfide, and selenide. And group 7A, your halogens, fluoride, chloride, bromide, iodide. Okay, again, if you drop the 1, it is okay if you just write F- or Br-. Okay, notice I also started saying bromide and fluoride and chloride instead of bromine, fluorine, and chlorine. We're going to talk about that change in name also as part of this unit. And then group 8A, they're stable. They do not form ions, so they never get a charge on them. Your group B elements. These are the transition elements, and they have more than one oxidation state or charge. Okay, so we're going to get into those. I've got a whole vodcast just all on transition metals, and you're going to learn how to deal with those. So they're going to use Roman numerals in order to show the charge. But again, more on that later. So when we go to name our cations, we're going to be using what's called the stock system. Up until this point, in the earlier 1900s, there was not a huge unification on how to name things. So the chemists got together and they decided on a naming system, and it's called the stock system. And so when we go to name cations, it's really simple. It's just the name of the metal and the word ion. Okay, now these are for your group A metals. Again, transition metals, whole separate lecture. Okay, so this is for your 1A, your 2A, your 3A, those that form cations. So, if I have Na+, this would just be called sodium ion. I can't just say sodium because sodium just means Na. I have to use the word ion to show that it's an ion. So Ca2+ would be calcium ion. Okay, write out the next one. Spelling is important in this section. There's no excuse for spelling things wrong when your periodic table's right there in front of you. Okay, so your next one, Sr2+, 2 plus. That would be strontium ion. Ga3 plus. Gallium ion. And Li plus would be lithium ion. Okay, now if we go to write the formulas for these, it says potassium ion. So I should write K plus. Okay, K is the symbol for potassium. If I look at on the periodic table there at the top, you should have a +1 written. And so you could write K plus, or you could write K plus 1. All of those are acceptable. Your magnesium ion. Find Mg on the periodic table. Find its charge. +2. Beryllium ion. Okay, beryllium is also in group 2A. Barium ion. Okay, now remember you want to write your names and symbols properly. Okay, symbols have a capital first letter and a lowercase second letter, if there is a second letter. I will be marking things wrong if you're not writing the element symbols properly. Also, when you go to take your quizzes in Kia, the capitalization will matter. Okay, you're going to have to capitalize your elements properly for your quizzes online. Okay, lastly, rubidium ion, Rb. Rubidium's got a +1. Okay, anions always have the same charge. They're not going to change around like some cations do. When you have an anion, you change the element ending to "ide." You usually take off the last syllable and change the ending to "ide." So fluorine becomes fluoride. So you take off the INE. Okay, so Cl1 minus chlorine, its name is chloride. Okay, nitrogen becomes nitride. Okay, do all the rest here on the page or in this section. Bromine is bromide. Oxygen is oxide. Iodine becomes iodide. If we're going in the other direction, sulfide. Well, that sounds like you got to find sulf. That is sulfur, S2 minus. The iodide ion, I minus. The phosphide ion. Okay, P -3. Notice it's phosphide, not phosphoride. Okay, takes off a little more on the end of phosphorus there. And then your strontium ion. Watch out, trying to trick you there. Sr2 plus. That was a cation. Now, when you go to write your formula units, you're going to write the metal first, followed by the nonmetal. So metal followed by the nonmetal. And this is what you did in the last section too. The metal is going to keep its name, and then the nonmetal is going to get the suffix "ide." So if you look at the first example there, I've got MgO. Okay, we just named the first metal, magnesium. And then the second nonmetal there is called oxygen, and we just practiced its name changes to oxide. So the name of MgO is magnesium oxide. No capitalization, two different words, one for the metal, one for the nonmetal. If we look at the next one, NaCl. First name the metal, it's just sodium, and then name the nonmetal. Chlorine becomes chloride, so its name is sodium chloride. Okay, do the next couple on your own. Aluminum and oxygen is aluminum oxide. Calcium with sulfur is calcium sulfide. So real easy, real basic, just the metal followed by the non-metal. One last one here. K3N, potassium nitride. Okay, now going from formula units to names is going the other way is a little more complex. Okay, taking names and writing the formulas. Remember, all formula units have to have a neutral charge. This means the pluses and minuses have to cancel out to zero. So if we take a look here at my three examples, I've got beryllium and fluoride. So write these out here. You've got Be, find them on your periodic table. Be has a charge of +2, and then fluoride has a charge of -1. And so it's going to take 2 of the fluorines to cancel out the beryllium. So then my formula is BeF2. You guys did this step in the last unit. You took the Be +2 and the F -1 and had to put them together to where the charges canceled out. The only thing you didn't do was do it from the names. So if you take a look at the next one, potassium chloride, you find potassium, K+, chloride is a -1. These cancel out perfectly, so I just rewrite it together, KCl. Doing the next one, strontium. Strontium is Sr. You'll find it in group 2A, which means it has a +2 charge. And then nitride is nitrogen, and it has a -3. And if you recall, this is the one where it takes a couple of each to put them together. So it takes 3 strontiums and 2 nitrogens to cancel out to 0. So there's the chemical formula for strontium nitride. Now, another easy thing about this naming is solo elements, or elements by themselves, are always named for that element. Doesn't matter how many there are. So N2 is just nitrogen. Okay, S8 is sulfur. And then Fe is just iron. So it doesn't, excuse me, it doesn't matter what the subscript is. It's just named for that element. Also reviewing for you guys is the diatomic elements. You need to memorize these. You will be quizzed on them this time. So these 7 diatomic elements always come in pair. You can start at hydrogen and draw a 7 starting at the end. Remember, we call that the hockey stick and puck. Or you can remember it with Brinkelhoff, or I have no brighter, clever friends, or just the elements themselves: hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. Okay, the thing to remember though, when you write them as symbols, you need to include the subscripts. So H2, N2, O2. Okay, if you're writing the diatomic elements that come in pairs, you need to write them as pairs. Okay, so here's your hockey puck and your hockey stick. Okay, hydrogen's your hockey puck, and then here's your hockey puck right here, and then your hockey stick right here, or the 7 for the 7 diatomic elements. So this completes this section. Okay, go ahead and do the assignment, and then go through the next vodcast. Your quiz will be covering sections 1 and 2.